One of my favorite things to talk about, regardless of the sport, is Hall of Fame. I love talking about the Hall of Fame because I'm a very big historian when it comes to professional sports, whether that be the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA. The two Hall of Fames that I get the most passionate about when I do talk about them are Major League Baseball, Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, and then, of course, the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I love talking about this stuff. I could talk about this stuff all the time. It brings up great debates when it comes to statistics and individuals' importance and how they changed the game or impacted the game, whatever the case might be. So I did this before talking about quarterbacks. I'm going to do it about wide receivers now. I'm going to talk about 8 guys that I think are the closest to being Hall of Fame worthy in today's NFL and tell you whether or not I think that they're Hall of Famers and why or why not that's the case. First guy I'll talk about is Brandon Marshall of the Chicago Bears. Since entering the league as a 4th-round pick out of Central Florida in 2006, Marshall, I think, sometimes is one of those guys that because of some of the off-the-field stuff, his on-the-field performance gets overshadowed and overlooked. I think sometimes we maybe don't have an appreciation for just how good this guy really is. But right now, at this point in time in his career, he's in his 8th season. He's been a 4-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro. He has 4 plus 100 reception seasons, 6 1,000 plus yard receiving seasons, and 2 10 plus touchdown seasons. He has a very impressive body of work. A body of work that would start to lead you to at least include this guy in the discussion of being a Hall of Famer. Now, the pros going in favor of Brandon Marshall right now would be the fact that he has several years of very good statistical production, and the fact that right now he's only like 28 years old. So he potentially has another 4 or 5 years of peak play and peak performance to come at the wide receiver position. The problems working against him, biggest problem, obviously, is a lot of the off-the-field stuff that I think a lot of the Hall of Fame voters and media members would hold against him when considering him for the Hall of Fame. And also the fact that while Brandon Marshall has put up some very good numbers, he's never necessarily been considered the very best at his position in the league. He has time to change that. Right now, he's not a Hall of Famer, but like I said, he's only like 28 years old. If he has another 4 or 5 years where he's putting up 90 to 100 receptions and 1,300 to 1,500 yard receiving seasons, it's going to be very hard to deny this guy a place in Canton. He's not there yet, but he's getting closer every day. Roddy White's been a very good, steady hand down in Atlanta since being a first-round pick in 2005. Early on in his career, he had some struggles. He also had to deal with Michael Vick and then the uncertainty of the 2007 season before Matt Ryan came in and you really started to get the best you could out of Roddy White. He's been a 4-time Pro Bowler, a 1-time All-Pro, 2 100-plus receiving seasons, 6 1,000-plus yard seasons, 2 10-plus touchdown seasons. So he has some very, very nice numbers. Statistically, he compares somewhat favorably to a Brandon Marshall I've talked about a little bit before. A couple of things working against Roddy White, though, is the fact that unlike Brandon Marshall, who's 28, Roddy White is already 31. And in this 2013 season, he's been dealing with one injury after another, which would lead you to believe that maybe a Roddy White is getting a little closer to the end of the road in terms of the peak performance period of his career. He's been a very good receiver for a number of years, but I don't think he's been like a true superstar at the position, especially now when you look at the superstar in his team in terms of wide receivers, Julio Jones, not Roddy White. And that's something that would impact Roddy White when it would come time for the Hall of Fame. I think Roddy White is a very good wide receiver. I don't view him at this point in time as a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And frankly, I think it would take another 3 to 4 years of really good production to really change my opinion on him. And I don't know if we're going to get that out of him. So I would anticipate that Roddy White's just going to be one of those receivers that you remember for being very good, but not great, and therefore not a Hall of Famer. Next, we move on to Megatron, Calvin Johnson of the Detroit Lions. He was the one wide receiver pick, ultimately, that Matt Millen got really right. Watching this guy at Georgia Tech, you're like, man, it's a shame he plays in the system that he plays in. You could just see that this guy is going to be a beast, is going to be a monster, and has Hall of Famer written all over him, which, of course, is why the Raiders took Jamarcus Russell ahead of him, because that made a lot of sense. Well, when you look at Megatron, This is his 7th year in the league. He's still got a lot of years, you would assume, left in the tank, even though occasionally I get concerned about how long he's going to play because he seems to have a little nick here, a little nick there, a nagging injury here, nagging injury there. But his production at this point in time in his career is second to none. A 3-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, 5 1,000-yard plus receiving seasons, including 2 seasons with over 1,600 receiving yards, and setting the single-season record for most receiving yards. He has 4 10-plus touchdown seasons, a 2-time leader in touchdown receptions, a 3-time leader in receiving yards. When I look at Calvin Johnson and his body of work right now, to me, I compare him to somebody like a Sterling Sharp from 2 decades before, a guy that in his short run put up some incredibly impressive numbers that should have been enough to get him into the Hall of Fame. If Calvin Johnson retired at the end of this season, I would argue that he has been dominant enough in his time and been that good enough in his time where he would deserve to be a Hall of Famer. Not a first ballot Hall of Famer or anything like that. He has been good enough, though, to me, after 7 years, to put him in the Hall of Fame. So another 2 or even 3 years of similar level Megatron production, no doubt about it, a slam dunk Hall of Famer and a guy you might start making an argument about that he might be a first ballot Hall of Famer. The next guy I'm going to talk about, frankly, I don't think gets the love that sometimes he deserves and doesn't get the respect or the credit that I think his career production is merited sometimes, especially when it comes to Hall of Fame possibilities, and that is Wes Welker of the now Denver Broncos. You look at him, an undrafted player in 2004, one of the greatest trades in NFL history. Well, the Patriots were able to steal him away from the Miami Dolphins, just stole him away from the Miami Dolphins. And in his career, he put up 5 Pro Bowl seasons. He's been a 2-time All-Pro, 5 100-plus reception seasons, 5 1,000-yard seasons, a 2-time leader in the league in receptions. Wes Welker has been kind of like that gold standard of slot receivers over the past, 7 to 8 years. Now, when you look at him, one thing that could potentially hurt him in terms of Hall of Fame voting is the fact that, it's easy to put up tremendous numbers when you play with Tom Brady all these years, and now, towards the end of your career, you're playing with Peyton Manning. He's been in the league. This is his 11th season. I would envision that Welker maybe has 2 or 3 more years where he could put up Wes Welker-type production. At this moment, I probably wouldn't say he's for sure a Hall of Famer, but I do think he's a little bit closer to that consideration than what people may realize, especially when you look at the marquee spots that he played in, playing along Tom Brady for so many years and Peyton Manning now. He's very close. He's a lot closer than I originally thought until I took a closer look at his numbers and compared him to his peers. Wes Welker has been very impressive, and like I said, I don't think sometimes he gets the respect he deserves for just how good he's been. Steve Smith of the Carolina Panthers is the first of 2 members of the 2001 draft class that I think are in that discussion for Hall of Fame worthiness as a wide receiver. When you look at Steve Smith, since he's come into the league, he's been, at times to me, one of those forgotten men, a guy that is a legit number 1 wide receiver, but because of the team and the city and the market that he plays in, doesn't always get the attention or respect that I feel that he deserves. He ranks in the top 26 all-time, both in receiving yards and receptions. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro. He has 1 100-plus reception season, 7 1,000-yard seasons, 1 10-plus touchdown season. But you look at Steve Smith, to me, I don't think numbers alone are the measure of the player or the man in this case, because I look at him and I see a guy that's all 5'9", 5'10", was a 3rd-round pick. And the bottom line is he's always been craving that respect that he so righteously has deserved. And his biggest thing to me and why he is a Hall of Famer to me, not a first ballot guy, nothing like that, but a guy that I would argue someday does belong in Canton, even if his career ended right now, is the fact that he put up some great numbers over the years without great quarterback play. So many years of his peak career were spent with Jake Delhomme at starting quarterback. Just think about that for a second, Jake Delhomme. But the biggest thing about Steve Smith that I think puts him over the top is you always saw Steve Smith play big in big spots in big games, whether that be the Super Bowl, in the playoffs, or big games that his team needed to win in the regular season. It always seems like Steve Smith was clutch. It always seemed like he clutched up, he manned up, and he played big when his team needed him the most. Those are the type of guys that I like the most, and those are the type of guys that I feel, when all else fails, deserve induction into the Hall of Fame. And that's why I feel Steve Smith someday will have a bust in Canton and should have a bust in Canton. Next up for discussion is the other member of that 2001 draft class, and that's a first-round pick out of the U for the Indianapolis Colts, and that is Reggie Wayne. I think, frankly, he's a guy that flies very much under the radar and doesn't quite get the attention, respect, credit that he deserves. I don't think people realize just how good Reggie Wayne has been during the course of his career. I compare him from a number standpoint very similarly to somebody like an Isaac Bruce of the St. Louis Rams for many years. He's 11th all-time in receiving yards. He's 8th all-time in receptions. He's been a 6-time Pro Bowler, a 1-time All-Pro. He's had 4 100-plus reception seasons, 8 1,000-yard receiving seasons, 3 10-plus touchdown seasons. The numbers are there. One thing that hurts Reggie Wayne is that for many years he played on the other side of Marvin Harrison. For many years he had Peyton Manning throwing him the ball. But look, the bottom line is, you guys in his 14th year in the league, he's had consistent, steady production year after year after year. By and large, hasn't been a guy that's raised a lot of stink, hasn't been a headache in the locker room, hasn't been a great media distraction, has a lot of positives going for him. I think he's going to be one of those guys that falls kind of into that Andre Reed category. A guy that you watch and you say, yeah, he probably is a Hall of Famer, but it's probably going to take him a number of years to get there. Maybe somebody similar like an Art Monk as well. The same thing you'll probably see maybe with an Isaac Bruce. I do argue that Reggie Wayne is a Hall of Famer. He's had consistent production, top-level production for many years. You can say, well, he played next to this guy. He had this guy throwing on the ball. The bottom line is he still came to play, and he still put up those numbers year in and year out. So I have no problem with giving Reggie Wayne a bust in Canton, Ohio someday. The last two guys that I'm going to talk about, I think, are the two guys that most people think of when they think of Hall of Fame wide receivers in today's NFL. And they're probably the two guys that are the closest to being Hall of Famers. The two guys that are going to be the most likely to get in and get in the quickest. The first one is Larry Fitzgerald of the Arizona Cardinals. Since coming into the league as a 3rd overall pick in 2004 in that great draft class, Larry Fitzgerald has been one of the preeminent players at his position over the past 11 years. It's sometimes a forgotten man in some cases because of the fact that he plays for the Arizona Cardinals. He ranks in the top 30 all-time in receiving yards and receptions. He's a 7-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro. He once led the league in receptions, twice led the league in receiving touchdowns, 2 100-plus reception seasons, 6 1,000-yard seasons, 4 seasons of 10-plus touchdowns. Larry Fitzgerald has been a dominant player for a good number of years. And one thing to keep in mind with that, too, is he only played a couple of years with Kurt Warner. He's had a lot of shitty quarterback play in the rest of his time in Arizona. Not to mention, for a number of years, he had Anquan Boldin on the other side. So Larry Fitzgerald didn't necessarily get the targets that you might see a Megatron get Calvin Johnson in Detroit, for example. Well, the biggest thing that's going to work in favor of Larry Fitzgerald is the fact that he's been on a Super Bowl team, a team that made it to the Super Bowl at least. He's been very media-friendly over the years. He's carved out a nice niche there. The media loves him. They adore him. They respect him. He plays the game the right way. He doesn't create a lot of fuss. He does great off-the-field work, all of this stuff. When you combine that with all of his on-field accomplishments, I think it makes him a no-doubt Hall of Famer. The only thing that'll hurt him a little bit is maybe he doesn't have the greatest statistics ever, just because of the fact I think he's been punished because of shitty quarterback play for so many years in Arizona. But I have no doubt about it that someday Larry Fitzgerald will be a Hall of Famer. It'll probably only take him 3 to 4 years after he's eligible to get in. And the other guy who I think has pretty much already stamped his place into Canton is Andre Johnson of the Houston Texans. For my money, the most Hall of Fame-worthy wide receiver in the NFL today. He was the 3rd overall pick in the 2003 draft. I want you to think about that, Detroit fans. You drafted Charles Rogers. Oopsie daisies. Sometimes that shit happens. You know, you look back and you're like, what could have been? But they should have known. If you would have watched Andre Johnson at the U, you would have seen that he had greatness written all over him. And he's shown that out in the NFL. He's in the top 20 all-time in both receptions and receiving yards. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, 4 100-plus reception seasons, 6, count them 6, 1,000-yard-plus receiving yard seasons, including 3 of those seasons he went for over 1,500 yards. 2-time leader in the league in receptions, 2-time leader in the league in receiving yards. One negative against him is that he's never had a 10-touchdown season. That would be the one negative that would stand out to me. One thing that hurts Andre Johnson a little bit is the fact that he played in Houston for so many years. He got saddled with somebody like David Carr for several years, and even with Matt Schaub to a certain degree. Imagine the numbers that an Andre Johnson would have put up if he had somebody like a Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Drew Brees throwing him the ball, or even a second-tier quarterback, somebody like a big Ben Roethlisberger, or even an Eli Manning, a Tony Romo. I mean, just imagine the numbers that Andre Johnson could have put up if he had a big-time quarterback throwing him the ball, which is what, to me, makes his numbers all that more impressive. The fact that for so many years he didn't have great quarterback play. He never really has had great quarterback play there in Houston to feed him the ball. He never really had that real legit number 2 complementary weapon. So a lot of times he was going against double teams and in some cases triple teams. You knew if they were throwing the ball late in big game situations that Andre Johnson was going to be the target. He was going to be the one that had to make the play, and time after time after time after time he did. Now, Andre Johnson's been hurt a little bit in the sense that the Texans haven't exactly made a lot of deep playoff runs. They made the playoffs twice during his tenure there. But to me, for my money, he's been my favorite wide receiver in the NFL over the past decade. I love the way the guy plays the game. He's physical, he's hard, he's tough. I just love this guy. I love his attitude. I love everything about this guy. And to me, Andre Johnson is the most Hall of Fame worthy wide receiver in today's NFL. I didn't bother talking about in this video guys like A.J. Green and Julio Jones because they're too young yet. I don't think we need to worry about talking about them just yet. I want to know what you think, if you agree with me and where I slotted these 8 receivers in terms of their Hall of Fame worthiness or not. Let me know down in the comment section down below.